Ms. Pageant, thank you so much for agreeing to meet with me today for your pre-conference. So we'll just talk a little bit about your plan for your lesson on Monday when I come to do your formal observation.
Okay.
All right. So let's just talk a little bit about what the lesson's going to be about, what I will be seeing.
Okay. So in dyslexia, we don't necessarily have objectives, but I'll follow the lesson that is provided because it's MTA. So we have our own scope and sequence.
Sure.
So in Kid 5, you'll be seeing Kid 5 and Kid 7.
Okay.
So the Kid 5 students will be learning the ow sound, OU, diphthong OU, and diphthong OW.
Okay.
They'll learn where it's used, if it's in initial and medial position, or if it's in final position, how would we spell that?
Okay.
They'll also be introduced to reading the IND pattern, ILD pattern, OLD pattern, those long vowel sounds like and, like kind, ald, like wild, and old, like gold.
Okay.
When they see them in words, because
Okay.
they're not pronounced correctly.
Sure. They don't follow the pattern we're
so they're
accustomed
looking
to
at those
seeing.
patterns.
Okay.
And then we'll be following, learning some irregular words and why they're irregular.
Okay.
And then in Kid 7, we're gonna be learning the digraph part of OU, because diphthong OU can also be a digraph, and so it will have this long oo sound, like supu.
Okay.
And then they'll be learning some irregular words and why they're irregular.
Okay. So I know that with the dyslexia, we don't necessarily, like you said, see those typical standards that we're accustomed to TEAC-wise. So how does what your students are learning impact what they're doing in their other courses in terms of accessing curriculum?
It helps them to read better, and so if they can read better, then it helps them all the way around.
Sure.
It helps with them on their vocabulary words, maybe unfamiliar words that they're not sure. If they can sound it out, if it's you're able to sound it out, they would know the sounds and they can maybe figure out what the word is and put some meaning to that.
Do the kiddos ever come back to you and talk about things they're doing in their other classes and how things they've learned, like, oh, I saw that in that pattern in science, or do you?
Yeah, I do see that, especially when we get into like the Latin and Greek roots, or some of the sounds that you see like inside, like digraph PH. They see that a lot, like in math with like graphs, and in science they see it a lot. Like that PH is very used a lot in scientific words. So they'll come back and they'll say, I knew how to pronounce that, or I knew how to spell that.
Do you feel like, based on working with these students that when they're able to make that connection, it's a deeper connection?
Yes.
Yeah. That makes sense. So how will you know that you've accomplished the purpose of the lesson?
Well, we'll be practicing reading, but at the end of the kids, they're gonna be having to take a final kid test, and if they know those sounds, then they'll be able to pass it. But I teach for mastery, so they won't be taking the kid test until I know that they have mastered those sounds, how to spell them, where to identify them. Same thing with being able to read those 3 patterns that I discussed earlier. They'll have to be able to read those.
Sure.
And in a follow-up lesson, they're gonna have to learn to spell those also. So as long I will be teaching for mastery for both of them, and we won't go on until I know for sure that they can pronounce and spell those sounds.
Okay. So I hear, and this is a curiosity on my part, we're talking about words in isolation, right? Because we're working on those patterns. Is there anything that happens in your room to look at the generalization of what they're learning? So how they generalize learning those patterns into their everyday reading?
Yeah, we read like paragraphs, and we have books, like reading books that we use that have stories in them, that have the sounds that they've learned throughout the kids. And so they do practice reading those sounds,
Okay.
not just in isolation, but
Sure.
when they see them, in other words.
Sure.
Yeah.
I know that you've got some diverse learners in your dyslexia groups. So talk a little bit about how you manage those diverse learners, if there's things that you do to accommodate.
I do. I try to follow their IEPs and their 504s naturally,
Sure.
but we work in small groups.
Mhm.
In some cases, if they're struggling, I do pull them and work with them one-on-one, and we just concentrate. And I'm lucky because I have small classes, but I can pull and work with them one-on-one and just focus on the things that they really need. And also we have the Lexia Power Up program, and that focuses on their weaknesses and helps them with their reading and their grammar and word study, grammar and comprehension.
Sure. Okay. So what are, within there's not necessarily a unit of study. I know we talked through, dyslexia is a little bit different. You've got your kits. So where does this fall within their learning in terms of, are we within the kit, I guess?
In Kid 5, they're like in the middle of the kit.
Okay.
Because they're a little bit slower. One of the students, he really struggles, so. The other one, he struggles a little bit too. So
Yeah.
I've slowed them down. So they're in the middle of the kit.
Okay.
My Kid 7 kids read really well already, which I was kind of surprised, to be honest with you.
Sure.
And so they're not at the end, but they're getting close to the end of Kid 7. So, but like I said, they read pretty well.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. So because I know we talked about we're doing Kit 5 and Kit 7, and I know that what knowledge I do have of dyslexia, you're not working with them at the same time. So talk a little bit about what I'm going to see in your classroom for the students who are not at like your focus group.
Okay. So when I am working with other students, my other kids have activities that they're supposed to do. So they go to ReadWorks and they have an article of the day that they have to read, which is a group of 10 different articles that they choose from that I have already prepared for them, and then they get to choose from them. And they read the article, and then they go in and they write like 5 facts that they've learned from that article. And then they also have a daily reading article that is one that I've picked specifically where they have to read it, and then they have to answer 5 questions about it. That's a multiple choice type question.
Sure.
And then usually I have some kind of handwriting that goes along with what we're learning in our lesson. I don't really have time to focus on handwriting in the lesson, so we do extra, like we'll go over, okay, so this week, I usually do it as a weekly thing, we're gonna be learning the letter C in cursive.
Sure.
And so that they'll have like one sheet that'll just have them practicing letter C.
Okay.
So the ones that are at their desk will be doing the article of the day, the daily reading article, and then when they finish that, after they've done their handwriting, they work on Lexia. And I try to encourage 30 minutes a day of that, each class period, and I've been rewarding the ones that have that on Fridays.
Sure.
And so that has helped, and so because they all want the reward, usually it's Talkie chips, so they like that.
Yeah. I was gonna say, how do you feel like that's impacting their willingness to participate?
It has impacted greatly, yeah, because I've been rewarding them with like candy every time they have class.
Sure.
And if they finished, it depends on how many pieces of candy they get. They get 1 piece for every activity that they've completed, so they like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So looking back at the ReadWorks and article of the day, I heard you say that they are choosing the articles, but you've kind of pre-chosen a bank of articles for them to choose from, so you know what they're reading about. How does that tie into what they're learning, or maybe things they've previously learned in terms of patterns and things? Is there cross connection between to a degree?
Not really. Usually the stuff that I pull, it's my hope that they learn something that's out of their scope, that's like, we're doing, because it's Hispanic Heritage Month, we've been doing things about Latin America.
Okay.
So this for the past 2 weeks, they've been reading articles on sports in Latin America,
Mm-hmm.
and they all like that because it's all boys.
Sure.
And so they read the articles, and it's stuff that they kind of know already about. Some people that they know,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like Pele and
Mm-hmm.
Messi
Mm-hmm.
and people like that. So it's something that's interesting to
Mhm.
them. So there's and I've tried to pull the other article, the daily reading article, is something from that too. So like right now, the next 6 weeks, I guess, or 9 weeks, I should say, our first article that we're going to start is famous places in Latin America, because it's still in October. We're still studying
Mm-hmm.
Native American Hispanic Heritage Month.
Yes.
So
Okay.
I try to do it around stuff like that. Like in February when we have Black History Month, I pull articles about famous African Americans and things like that.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to broaden their scope,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of times I'll do like science articles if I know some of the things that they're learning in
Sure.
science.
So some cross curricular.
I'm trying to do that, yes.
Yeah.
And it's very, it's where they can, it's differentiated because they can either read it or they can listen to it.
Okay.
So it's all of it's audio
Sure.
too. They have that choice.
And you said there's comprehension questions?
Yes.
Okay.
There's 5 comprehension questions.
How generally are they doing on comprehension when they're reading independently or listening?
It
So
just
far.
depends. Sometimes they'll try to do it
Mm-hmm.
without listening to it,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll not do so well. And then when they go back and listen to it,
Yeah.
they usually make 100
Okay.
if they're really trying.
If they're really trying.
Yeah.
So,
And-
what? Go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. One thing about using reworks like that, you can adjust the reading level. So mine are all on a lower, like I usually try to get a 4th or 5th grade reading level, and if I see a lot of them are struggling, then I'll go back and lower it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I try, and if they're doing better, then I'll up the reading level
Sure.
on some of them.
So do you feel like right now most of them are functioning well below grade level in terms
Oh
of
yeah,
their
they're
reading?
all.
Yeah.
I have a few that are reading probably right at grade level.
Okay.
I did the Devil's fluency check, and they're, some of them are reading, you know, like 102, 106 words per minute
Mm-hmm.
at an 8th grade level. So, and I think it's
That's
135, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I think it's like 135 at the beginning of 8th grade, or the end of 8th grade that you're supposed to be at. So they're a little bit behind,
Mm-hmm.
but for the most part, my kids are probably reading anywhere from 60 to 70 words per minute
Sure.
at an 8th grade level.
Yeah.
With about 90, I have one that's like 88%
Mm-hmm.
fluency.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most of them, they're reading about 60 to 70 words per minute at an 8th grade
With
level.
Good accuracy.
Yeah, with 90 or above accuracy.
Okay.
So I was happy with that.
Sure. You know, it's not. That's part of having dyslexia. That disfluency in your reading. So I'm happy to hear that there's a couple that are really fluency wise close to grade level.
Oh yeah,
I think that's
some
great.
they had the ones that were like, I had one that was 102 and one that was 106 words per minute,
Mm-hmm.
and they were reading like 95%.
Yeah, that's great.
It is great.
Yeah,
I don't see
that's-
that very
Yeah,
often.
kudos for sure.
Yeah.
So when I'm in your room on Monday morning, thinking through the lesson that you're going to be teaching, what would you like me to focus on? Is there anything that, you know, you really want me to make sure that I'm looking for? No?
No, just that, you know, I just do the same thing every day. I do the cards, then we'll have our lesson, and then if we have time through the lesson, we'll pick up a little bit of the reading practices or spelling practices that I'm focusing on.
So I know that in walkthroughs and things, I have seen some bell ringer, I believe, type like.
Oh, the question.
So
of the
talk
day.
a little bit about that.
I started that this year
Uh-huh.
after attending the PD last year about exit tickets.
Yes.
And so I started that. I was like, how can I apply that to my class?
Mm-hmm.
And so when they come in, they have like a sticky note,
Mm-hmm.
or I do placard cards sometimes too,
Okay.
where or placard. I'm not sure what it's called. Anyway, where they just hold up the card and I can walk by and see, you know, which one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But so we use those, but I'm doing it to see if they really understand what they're learning in there.
Sure.
As far as like spelling patterns, like the first 9 weeks practically we've been practicing spelling with the k sound in all the different ways. And you would think they would know that because they were introduced to it, get to, but a lot of them still can't spell with K and C, C-K-K-E, K, you know, see when to spell with that.
Sure.
So we've been really working on that. I focused on that. And now I'm kind of focusing in on syllable division and just getting them to decide, well, how would I divide it? Or which pattern would I use? Am I going to use the VCCV pattern or the VCV? Like, I want them to be able to look at that word and like, okay, that's a vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel. I'm going to divide it between the two consonants most of the time. You know, my accent goes on the first syllable.
Sure.
So I just want them to be able to identify the pattern right now, and then we'll get into actually, okay, I want you to divide this word into syllables.
So talk a little bit about how you choose what you're doing. So I know, like you had said, that they were struggling with the K, spelling the K, whether it's C-K-K. So is it generally based on what they're struggling with? Is there like you have a plan for the year of kind of how you're?
Sorry,
That's
I
okay.
interrupt you.
You're good.
But, when we first start out, we have to do the spelling. How do you spell this sound? And they struggle. They couldn't do that. So that's when I pulled up the K because the K's tends to be the hardest one. And syllable division, we just start out in Kid 2. They teach you the VCCV pattern, and so one of my questions. Or one of the things that because we reviewed in the first like 2 weeks of school, I went back and reviewed the kids, and one of the things we reviewed was syllable division, and they couldn't answer. I'm like, well, okay, what I asked them, I'm like, what pattern? Because at that time it wasn't like a structured lesson, but we were going over things that I thought that they should already know from kids. If they're in Kid 5, 6, or 7, they should know that because they learn in Kid 2. And they couldn't tell me, like, how I would divide the word. It was like rabbit. And I was like, okay, so we're going to like, I'm like, well, how do you know? I'm like, how do you know how many syllables are in a word? They couldn't tell me that. So I'm like, okay, so we'll start back at the beginning. And we'll talk about, ever how many sounded vowels you have, that's how many syllables there are. That kind of thing. So that's where
some formative assessment to kind of figure out where they're
that's
at.
Where I tried the first 2. I think it's 2 or 3 weeks of school. We worked just on stuff like that. I didn't really get. We started our lessons, but I didn't get really into
deep
because I was trying to review and see where exactly they are. Since I pulled from all middle schools, you just don't know what their background
to the degree
is, because some of the teachers haven't been teaching it very long or were new, and so I'm trying to get the procedures in place, see what they know, what cards they don't know, how they know how to do the spelling, and that kind of stuff.
That makes sense. But our teachers do that, right? You got to figure out where your kids are so you know where to start.
Exactly.
So while I'm in your classroom, are there any specific student behaviors you feel like I should watch for? That might be a...
This group is all boys, 9th grade boys. They're coming from lunch, so they're gonna probably be a little either too hopped up or sleepy. So they're gonna want to like try to put their head down if I'm not working with them. And they're, for the most part, we have student expectations because they came in and they were kind of rowdy. So the first day of school, I let all my classes. That was their question of the day. What rules do you think we should have in this class? And they filled out the little sticky. I was like, put 3 on your little sticky note. And I took those and I made a student expectation. And so those expectations that are for all my classes, but especially that one, are the ones that they came up with. Like no talking when I'm working with a group of students. No talking about themselves, no play, roughhousing, or because they like to come in pushing and shoving and playing and things like that. So, the behavior and making sure they stay on where they're supposed to be instead of YouTube football channel,
Right.
So, like that.
When you do have a small group that you're working with and other students who are working independently or off task, how do you manage that?
I try to. Actually, this year's been great because we have class-wise, so I try to pull that up on my computer, and I'm not always able to see what they're on, because if I'm in the middle of a lesson, but I try to get up and down a little bit, and when students are like working and we're like completing one activity and they're getting ready for another activity, I'll like glance over there and I'll try to see what they're on their computer.
Sure.
I don't always get that, but for the most part, and it's really helped since I've been rewarding the Lexia thing.
Sure.
Because they know that they have to get that 30 minutes per class period, and so they have to get through with everything else to get that. So they've been working a little bit harder to make sure.
So some of those incentives you've put in
has helped.
Get
Yeah,
them
they're not just
on
all on YouTube.
Sure.
And Mr. Abbott's going to show me how to block that, because he blocks it in his class.
That's great.
So I'm going to start doing that too, because I don't know how to do it, but he says you can do it with ClassWise, and it's real easy. So
okay, you can just tell them what they can be on, I guess.
Yeah, I think you can.
You can go here or here.
Yeah.
That's it.
I think so.
All right. So just kind of wrapping up, I know you talked a little bit about, we talked about the lesson, we've talked about like your bell ringer. I heard you mention exit tickets. I know that you were teaching in somewhat of an atypical classroom in the sense of it's a scripted lesson. And so it's okay if you haven't, but have you been able to work in any kind of exit ticket activity strategy to kind of bring the lesson back together at the end?
I do. They do it at the beginning, and then at the end before they leave, we talk about the answer to the exit, to the question of the day. Yeah, we don't go over it at the beginning of class. I'll read it to them because some might have trouble reading it, and then I let them fill out their little sticky note, or if it is a placard card, then I'm ask them at the end of the class period, which question or which answer would you think this would be, A, B, C, or D, and then they have to turn their card. So, and I can see, it's supposed to be answer A. So the next time, when we have the question of the day or before class starts, I'll talk about the answer to that. But at the end of class, yes, I do go over.
Come back over. And then you, like a little mini lesson, if it's like just like a quick reteach.
And then, I was thinking maybe I could pull that in on Fridays when we're doing a week, because we do have a little bit more freedom on Fridays. As far as, I do more of a fun type activity. It's not really fun, but like, it is to them because it's not a structured,
It's not like a typical NTA lesson.
Yes.
Yeah.
We still covering it, like, cause they do like, to learn their sight words, we do like alphabet bingo. So, they enjoy that.
Sure.
And it does help with all their irregular words and stuff like that.
Yeah, so for them it's fun.
It is fun, but yeah, and they get rewarded for that kind of stuff. And then we're doing an interactive notebook on grammar, which they need. So I've been thinking, maybe I could pull in some of the things that we talk about during the week with that and give them more of an in-depth lesson. But I try to bring it in when I'm doing spelling, like with the K. During that week I plan for my spelling lesson that I do, just working with that and trying to get them to understand that. And for the most part, all of them did. That's why I moved on. So when I do syllable division during the lesson, we focus in on that. So that's where I'm trying. But I do go back and tell them what the correct answer is and go over a little bit why it's like that.
Okay. Well, I'm excited to be in your classroom on Monday. Is there anything else you feel like needs to be shared?
No. I'm excited for you to come.
I always like to come to your class, so.
I'm sorry, it's gonna be a little boring probably.
No, not at all, not at all. Well, as someone who used to assess kids to determine if they had dyslexia, and then I have 2 kiddos with dyslexia in my home, I'm always very intrigued by MTA lessons and kind of how it all works, so not boring at all. All right, let me stop this and we'll be done. All right, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining me this morning for your post-conference. I just want to start by saying how much I enjoyed your lesson. Like I said before in your pre-conference, I've always enjoyed coming into your classroom. Just knowing that the kiddos in your room are struggling learners, struggling with reading, and just seeing the needle move is really exciting. So today we're going to spend a little bit of time discussing the lesson. We're really going to dig into the teaching and learning that was occurring, all right?
Okay.
So we should be in here roughly 20-25 minutes, just kind of depending on how deep our conversation goes. All right, so we're going to look at identifying some things that went really well, so strengths as well as areas of growth for that refinement process. You know, we've talked about early on in the year as we did goal setting that T-TEST is great because it's a continuous improvement model. So really, even the strengths, we'll look at ways we can continue to strengthen our strengths, okay? All right, so I'm going to let you get us started. So if you wouldn't mind going ahead and just talking about your overall impressions of the lesson.
The Kid 5 lesson, I think, went really well. Both boys were very engaged in the lesson. They always are very eager to learn, but I think it went okay. Kid 7 started out, I had one student that he kind of wanted to not participate as much because he was tired, but for the most part it went really well too.
Sure. So I noticed in your lesson, so I know that we were working on the ow sound, so the OU, OW, and then you had some irregular word patterns that you were working on. Talk a little bit about the process of how the lesson is laid out, because I know that you were kind of going back and forth between working on some of the introduction of like the sounds of words and then to the working on the irregular words. It was kind of pinging back and forth. So talk through the process of how you decide how to lay out the lesson.
The lesson's laid out for me. I follow a format, the scope and sequence of the program.
Okay.
So I start out with the OU, which is, you see it in initial and medial position. So we always start out, and it's the most common sound for diphthong OU. And then the lesson said for these particular words that have C in the second position, and they should have a S sound also. And so we talked about those three words, and then we go back into diphthong OW. And I'm not sure why they do that, but
I was curious on the how it pings back and forth.
Yeah, I just follow the scope and sequence of the program.
Okay.
So I'm not sure why they do that.
There's research to support doing it
Yeah,
that way.
there's research,
that
but
it's
I'm not
a
sure
research-based
why.
program.
I don't know if it gives the kids, if they're doing it to give the kids a break from that particular learning, like give them a different, to break their brain up and to give them different activities to do, so they're not, to keep them on train of thought.
Okay.
And change the activities ever so, you know what I'm saying? To keep them on track.
Okay.
Keep their minds on track, so their mind's not wandering. So, and the first one was OU, then the irregular words, where they have to do more writing and things like that, and tracing, and then we get back to where they have to see it and say it and write it.
So talk a little bit about when the lesson starts, you guys are going through, I believe those are considered letter cards.
Yeah, alphabet cards.
The alphabet cards.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about, because I know one group, Kit 5, had, theirs were similar to your Kit 7 kids, but there were additional. So can you talk about how you determine what cards are used?
Yes, it's every time a student learns a new sound, we have the alphabet card that goes with it, and it's added to their deck. So those are all the sounds that and letters that they have learned. You have two decks. You have the alphabet deck, then you have the sound deck or the spelling deck. It's keyword and sound, so we always give them a keyword to go with the sound. So we review those every day. That's the first thing that we do. And they add to the deck as they progress through the program. So when they learn a new sound, they learn new letters, we add those if they're regular for spelling. If they're not regular for spelling, you don't add them to the deck.
That makes sense.
So, and then the green cards that we do where the kids write the sound, I give them the sound and they write all the ways that sound can be spelled. That's added to also as we go through the program. So Kit 7 has more because they have learned They've progressed through the program further, so that's why they have. When you end up, the kids will have 100 letter cards and 100 letter sounds that they learned.
Okay. So how do you feel like your students are doing with their alphabet cards?
They are progressing. It's depends on what middle school they came from,
Mm-hmm.
how well they know them, because some middle schools don't emphasize it so
Mhm.
well. So I'm kind of when I come to high school, I have to kind of start
Circle back.
over,
Mhm.
and keep reminding them of the digraphs,
Sure.
combinations, diphthongs. There's only 4 diphthongs, so they tend to learn those
Mm-hmm.
pretty well, but the combinations gets them a lot. Digraphs and diphthongs and combinations and trigraphs and stuff. They might know the letter combination, but they'll forget if it's a digraph, and so I kind of have to emphasize that.
Sure. So I noticed it was speed almost. So like it's to me, I equated it to like our multiplication facts. Like you want to see it, know it, see it, know it, see it, know
The
it.
ultimate goal is to be able to not even show them the keyword and sound card.
Mm-hmm.
They should be able, when I show them the letter card, to say the keyword and sound that goes with that.
Oh,
Or
okay.
then later on, they should be able to see that sound and just say it. Say that card and say the sound that goes with it.
So is there any, out of curiosity, data collection that goes along with, like you said, they came to you not necessarily knowing or remembering all of those things? So is there any form of data collection so we can keep track of what they didn't know, so what they still need to work on, how they're progressing?
As far as the cards are
Just out of curiosity.
Oh yeah, we have
Mhm.
not necessarily the cards, but we have like spelling mastery, reading mastery.
Okay.
We keep up with that, or we're
Mhm.
supposed to. We
Sure.
keep up with that.
Sure.
So like when we get through an introduction, and like you saw us read
Mm-hmm.
some of the sounds, well, I'll go back
Mm-hmm.
and we'll read the entire page, and if they have to read it at like a 90% mastery before I can go on to the next lesson. So
Okay.
it's all based on mastery. Like when we get ready to spell that sound, like you saw us spelling k, well, we're still on k, which is a few kids back,
Sure.
because they still are having
Not
trouble
there yet.
spelling with that sound.
Okay.
So it's supposed to be mastery. Everything's based on mastery. So you're not supposed to move on to the next lesson unless they can master. The spelling always lags behind because that's one of their weaknesses anyway. So they can, a lot of times they'll read the sounds better in isolation than they can spell them. So
Sure.
but yes, we do have data collection.
So talking through, I hear you say we don't move on until there's mastery, but knowing that you have groups that have multiple students, how do you manage when some students master and some don't?
Usually you just keep going. That's what they do. That's what we were because we're trying ultimately to get them out of the program. But I'll pull those students usually and work with them individually, especially in like the reading part and the spelling part. I'll pull them. Friday's supposed to be our day that we like pull to do fluency tests and stuff. And on those days, I will work with them on like their sight words. I'll work with them on some of the reading parts that they don't get, and just kind of review some of those sounds, and work with some of the spelling concepts in isolation.
So intervention for intervention.
Yeah.
So do you see, is it the same kiddos who struggle generally with mastery? Or is it depending on concept?
No, usually it's the same ones. That it just depends on how bad their dyslexia is, because I have some in there that are really, and then I have some that don't struggle as much. And as the group that you saw you could probably tell the one that doesn't struggle as much as the other one. And he's been in the program a lot longer than the other boy that I had, that got it really quickly, and he never mastered everything, so they just kept, but he knows he knew the cards really well, but the other one, he struggles because his dyslexia is a little bit more.
Sure, more significant.
Yeah.
probably hitting on a few more underlying
Yeah, so I tend
causes.
to pull him more
Yeah.
and work with him. And he wants to learn so bad. Miss, can you read with me today?
That's
And he
good.
wants me to read with him. He wants to read and do better, so.
I think that's great. I think that's one area that, you know, dyslexia can feel childish.
Yeah.
And so that was a curiosity I had as well, because the two boys you were working with for the majority of the observation seemed very engaged and open to doing all of the things.
Yeah. That's not always necessarily the case.
Yeah.
They have been in it for so long that they're bored with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to do different things. Let them get up, come up and write on the board and use markers and, you know, just try to vary the activities as much as I can to keep them engaged. But they do, unless they've seen a significant increase in how it's helping them, they kind of lose faith in the program.
Sure. And
I try to keep them engaged, but that's not always the case. That there are some that just hate being in there, but they know they have to be. So
Sure.
But for the most part, this group that I had that you watched, they all are very on task most of the time.
They were both on it for sure.
They are like that even when you're not in there. They you know, want to learn. They want to get through the program, and I'm like, the only way you can get through is to participate and to learn. And they do. They like, you know, those two seem to like. And then I have some in Kit 7. They're just ready to get through. So they've
been doing it for a long time.
Yeah. They go through the lessons.
So they're ready. So you touched a little bit on the two boys who were with you, and I'll call it small group because you had them pulled up, were on task. Looking at the two boys who were your Kit 7 kiddos who were working on the other activities, talk a little bit about how you ensure students who are doing what they're supposed to be doing and on task when they're not directly with you. Because I know we had a struggler.
Yes, we did. He did not want to. He did the work that he was supposed to, but he didn't get on to Alexia.
He did his article.
Yeah, he did the article and he did answer the questions. Sure. But when it got to the Alexia part, which is what they don't really like, but I use a reward system. So Alexia tracks how long that they're on on that program. So they have to I say at least 30 minutes because they have plenty of time to do 30 minutes of Lexia. And if they have 60 minutes by the end of the Friday, if it's a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday, then they have to have 60 minutes each week because I only see them. And on the next Friday,
sure.
You know what I'm saying? They get a reward for that.
Right.
So, and they get like a big package of chips or Takis or something like that. And they like that. It's a reward for them. They think so they all try to get at least 60 minutes a week on, because, you know, some weeks I don't have them but 2 days a week. So,
right.
So it works out that so far pretty much everybody's working towards that. That day he was just tired.
He was tired.
It was Friday. They had played football the night before. Got in late.
So that's atypical of him. To a degree.
Yes. Yeah. But he did do what he gets graded on is the article of the day and the daily article where they have to read and answer questions. Yeah. And he did do that part. Yeah. But the Lexia part, I guess he thought he could make it up another day.
Sure. Yeah.
But I did try to, you know, he's like, I'm awake. And
I'm awake.
Yeah, but the other two that were doing their work, they probably could pass it. They're reading really well. They're reading over, they're not right at 9th grade level, but they're like at the end of 8th grade reading level. So that's, for me to see that in my class, that's pretty good. They're reading like 102, 107 words a minute with 98% fluency, accuracy rate. So
there are definitely peers walking around the building who don't get services from you who are not close to that. So no, that's exciting for sure.
They're doing good.
Yeah. All right, so like we've talked about, we always look at an area of reinforcement. So talking a little bit more about how your class runs, I saw a lot of really great things. It is very evident that you've got clear procedures and routines in place. So let's talk a little bit about how you establish routines and procedures in your classroom.
Okay. Do you want me to start with my rules?
Sure.
Okay, so when the first week of school, when they come, the first day we talk about what class this is, and I know that we discuss how they had it in middle school, and in middle school they group all the kids according to KIT.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they don't do that in high school because of scheduling, so we go over that, and I'm like, it's gonna look different from what you're used to. And I'm like, in your class, what would you think a good rule would be? So they had to list on a sticky note 3 rules that they thought that would make the class run effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And so I put those rules up, and they are posted, and the kids signed off on them, so they know what their expectation. I'm like, okay, these are our class expectations. No talking when I'm with a small group. If they have to go to the bathroom, they know not to interrupt me. They can only go one at a time, and they can only, they can't take their phone. So
they did. The kid, he asked to go to the restroom. He made sure he didn't have a phone. He got the clipboard. He checked the time. He signed out. He put his clipboard up. He got his pass. I mean, he did. It was he knew exactly what to do.
Yeah, because we go over that. We have a sign out sheet, and they know to take their pass. They can't take their phone. They know they're not supposed to have their phones out. We talk about, what they're expected. They have a question of the day. I had already done that before you got in there.
That's all right.
But anyway, they know that they're supposed to answer that and then get started. And if I'm not working, I try to alternate groups. So today I'll work with Kid 7 first, whereas I work with Kid 5 on Friday. So they know that, and they keep up with it. They know who's coming to see me first, and they'll go ahead and get started. And one of the reasons they like to get started is because so they can get that 30 minutes of Lexia, so they don't lose out on that. But I just sit down. We set as a class. We set those procedures, and if they get off course, then we talk about them. Okay, not necessarily in a bad way, but just okay, you shouldn't have you can't interrupt me. I try to, I know that you had a question, and I appreciate you wanting to ask me a question, but just wait until in between, our activities, like when they're doing something or we're erasing something or in between, then if you have a question about something. But I always start the first 2 weeks of school, just keep, going over them and over and over and over and that kind of thing.
And the circling back if something is off.
Because sometimes they, a few times they've slipped and taken their phones to
they're teenagers.
Yeah, and they want to.
And
then I'm like, we're not, or they want to eat in class. Yeah. And I do let them when it's just me, if I pass them out rewards.
Yes, don't bring your own snack.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So we talk about that, because they're coming from lunch. So they might want to eat chips and the, stuff they got out of the machine. I'm like, no, you just came from lunch.
Sure.
So
if you could change or redefine a routine or procedure you have, is there anything, it's tough once you get the year going, but is there anything that you think, man, I wish I would have done something this way, or a refinement? Are there any procedures you might want to refine?
I don't know. It runs pretty smoothly right now. Yeah. I wish there was a way that I could set my room up where I could see their screens, where I'm working at the back, where I might do that next year. I'm not sure about how I would refine anything, because they're pretty set.
They are pretty,
I wish I had longer time. If that was one wish I could get, is to have at least an hour to work with each group. That would work out a lot better. Or,
especially the week that you have them 2 days. For sure.
So I could, emphasize more things. But as far as routines, it's pretty set in there, and I'm happy with what I have. But if I had to change anything, I guess it would be, I don't know, the day question of the day. I don't feel like I don't really emphasize that enough. I mean, we do it, but I don't give it the emphasis that it really needs.
Sure.
So I guess maybe I'm gonna tweak that next year.
The way it's you want to make sure that all the things that you're doing align and tie to what you're doing, and so that would be the wondering is is it connecting in such a way that it is helping them grow towards what they're working on, or is it?
And I try to make it relevant to what we're learning. We're still doing syllable division, so I'm trying to make that relevant. And sometimes they're still not getting it. So yeah, I was thinking during the night, I'm gonna use, like, let them actually come up and hold cards, like spell the word out, and
Yeah.
like, where would you divide this, and like
Okay.
physically make them,
Yes,
see
I
if
love
that
that.
helps, see if that helps.
Well, and that's what I was
going
going to ask, are there ways, because dyslexia, and it is, MTA is very scripted, you gotta do things exactly this way. So are there ways to promote more, collaboration and communication within the lessons, maybe when they're working independently, word of the day, things like that?
Yeah. Like, when they come to the board, and I'm like, you can work together to figure out where this word goes. I thought that went
Yeah,
really
it
well.
did, it went great.
Because,
Yes, I was gonna compliment
they
you.
struggle, and it puts them kind of on the spot when I call them to come up there, and it's just, okay, how do you spell this word? How do you spell? So when I say, and it didn't make them uncomfortable, but I've learned from that in the past. If when they put somebody on the spot, I don't like being put on the spot.
Right.
So that's when I'm like, you can work together, and I do that sometimes when we get to a really difficult reading page, and I know they're gonna have a lot of issues with it. I'm like, okay, y'all read this together, work, and then we're gonna read it.
Get some practice.
Yeah, and practice it. So that helps them feel more comfortable, because as soon as you ask them to read something or spell something, this is what they start tapping. That is
The nervous tick.
Yeah, they are very, very out of their comfort zone. That body language is, and so I don't want to make kids like that.
Sure.
They get that all day long.
Sure.
When because they struggle so much.
Yeah.
In other classes. So, yeah.
Well, looking at your lesson, the full observation, your classroom, the way it's set up, it is clearly evident that routines and procedures are in place and followed with fidelity, which I think is great, which is the reason why I have marked Dimension 3.1, which includes routines and procedures, as your area of, we call it your glow, right? Your reinforcement. So looking at your reinforcement, the only thing that I think, what else could we do? Because when we get to talking about ratings, you're marked up in that area. You did a really great job, but we're always looking to grow. So leadership, like if there was a way to encourage some leadership within your classroom, that would be like even taking it to the next step. So that's something we can think about as we plan, moving forward, is within the room, are there ways to offer students some form of leadership? Because like you mentioned, they're struggling readers and they get nervous. So how can we help them harness that nervous energy and really, grow and become leaders within their room? Because they might not always get that opportunity to be leaders in their other classes because they're strugglers. So that's a thing, just to think about.
I would like to do that, incorporate
some ways to give them, ownership and take leadership of something.
Yeah.
Because some of those kiddos go to class and
are invisible.
They're invisible. Yeah.
And struggle.
Yeah. And so it gives them a place to really own. Yeah. So.
Okay.
Just a thought.
Yeah, I will think about that.
Yeah.
I just haven't ever, because
it's tough because it's so, we've got to do the script, we've got to run the, yeah. So, all right. So then moving forward, let's talk a little bit about data collection. So you said, yes, there's data collection, and I know there are 100 different ways to take data in a dyslexia class. So just talk a little bit about what data collection looks like formally. You kind of mentioned on when you have them on Fridays, there's fluency checks, and informally.
Informally, I do that every day when I'm asking them to read something, how well they get it. Just like the cards, I know I continually reinforce that. Formally, we do Dibbles fluency, and we usually take that every 2 weeks. I try to do.
It's on the Friday, so when you see them,
when I see them every Friday, when I see them on a Friday.
Yeah.
We have to send home progress reports, so I have to do fluency checks for those. I also do SALT words, and I'm not sure, it's one of the state of Texas's, I got it off of there, and it's like the 1,000, it's like Frost 1,000.
Yes.
And I check those, and we do, when we do the Friday, we do SALT word bingo. That's one way to keep up with it. And I use those words that they struggle with the most, not the ones that they know, but the ones that they struggle with the most on the bingo board. So it'll get them used to seeing those words, because you don't really think about, these are words that the kids should have learned in elementary.
A long time ago.
You know,
Yes.
but you have the words like though and through and, you know, all of those T words that
they look kind of visually similar.
Yeah.
Get them.
You know, all, you know, they just really struggle with a lot of the words that I wouldn't be surprised about. And so I do that, but I follow the program for each kid has, okay, it's a check off. They know this word, they can read it, they can spell it. Or not word, but sound. They know the sound, they can recognize the sound, they know when to spell with it. And like I said, spelling always lags behind.
Sure.
And Kid 7 doesn't have any spelling, but I always go back and around Kid 3 and start using it. Yeah. And they progress pretty far. But Kid 5, we're still struggling with the K sound. So
my oldest has been out of dyslexia intervention for probably 4 years, and he still struggles with spelling. It's just that's what lags. Because that's an area deficit.
And they might spell it phonetically from the sounds that they've learned.
Correct.
But it might not be correct.
Correct. At least now, you know, given the world we live in, everything's technology driven. If they can get phonetically close, they are at least getting the red line.
Yeah.
Which is what which is what my son and I have talked about. You've got to be close enough for the computer to know what you're trying to say. So so how is data provided to students so that they can help self-identify their needs and track their own progress?
Well, they are given a copy of their progress report to take home for their parents, for them to sign and bring back. But then they know as we progress through, you know, I kind of like, okay, this is where you are. They don't I don't give them anything formally. I guess I could. But they know what kid they're in, and I don't really tell them what lesson we're on.
Sure.
I guess I could improve on that for sure.
Well, that was what is there a way to include students in data collection?
Well, they know on Fridays that that's just part of it, yes.
In the tracking process?
Yeah. I don't know if they realize what we're doing, but I'm like, you know, this is where, these are the words you missed, and we're gonna work on those words. But I don't formally have a form that I give them. I could do that.
So that's an area that I thought we could look into. And that would, to me, would be the GROW, is that data and assessment, because you're collecting the data, and you're doing a great job of collecting the data, and I know that kids know somewhat what they're working on because they're in the lesson. But my wondering would be because for kids, knowledge is power and ownership is power, kind of like we talked about before, giving some leadership. So is there a way for us to include them in the data collection and tracking process so they can self-monitor their growth?
Yeah, I can do that. I'll figure out
Well, I was thinking, for sure. I was thinking through on those Friday fluency checks, we could have data folders, and because you're doing dibbles, you said on Fridays, we could have bar graphs, and they're tracking, and so they can see growth. I don't know. There's so much power in being able to see this is how I did, and this is how much I'm improving. Especially for your kids who are kind of gotten to the point where I'm not interested anymore because I think I'm never going to finish or whatever it is. To be able to see
I can make a bar graph of as they progress to see how fast they're reading or how many words they're reading per minute.
Yes, but I almost think we could do it could be a blank bar graph that you and I can help you, that we prepare, and then each week, they've done their dibbles, here's your fluency, and they're going to take their blue marker, red mark, and I'm going to track myself so that I can see. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I like that. I had never really thought about that. But it's a good idea. I can do that. That's totally doable.
Yeah, there's something, to say for kiddos when they're like, wow, I did that. That ownership. So that would be the area I think that we could grow, is just
I would totally agree.
Pulling kids into that data collection process. All right, so questions about your refinement or reinforcement? Your lesson was great, so it's hard, it's sometimes difficult to find some of those, what are we gonna refine? What are we gonna work, because you're doing so well. But that
The
is,
data collection and stuff, I can definitely
Yeah.
improve in that, I'll be the first to admit.
yeah.
So I've just been doing what they tell us to do,
Sure,
you know,
well,
which
and
is
that's,
to collect, to read the dibbles and
Yeah.
all of that.
and that's what I think you and I talked about last year was like, yes, we have to follow the way the program is laid out, but it can be dry. So it's like, how can we zhuzh it up a little bit and really get kids interested? And you've done a great
I've tried.
job. I know it.
Putting it all in a notebook
Uh-huh.
helped tremendously,
Yeah.
because it makes them feel like, oh, I have a note, they
I-
love that.
They
when I-
loved getting. Ask the kid. He got his stuff from the bin. I can't think of his name, but he went over. He knew exactly where he was going. And again, there's ownership in knowing like, this is mine. I'm gonna go here and get it. I'm gonna do my work. This is where it goes, because there's thought behind it, and I think kids appreciate that.
Yeah, they like and it's so funny that they like writing with that dry erase marker in there, and cause I put the dry erase boards that I just made with
Mhm.
notebook paper and.
Like inside the page protector.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they write, and they just think that is the greatest thing. They wanna use that the whole time,
Kids.
spell with
I
it.
did get tickled with the one kid that at one point he's like, he takes all three of his colors and and you're like, no, that's cheating. No.
Yeah, cause they're supposed to do it 3 times.
3 times. Yeah, to get to the muscle memory,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. All right, so we'll look at ratings. Like I said, I felt like you did a phenomenal job. Remembering that proficient is rock solid, and anything, using the rubric, I start with proficient and look at each indicator and see, if we're there, if there are areas we can bump up to accomplished. You didn't have any areas that I would have said we need to, bump down and look at developing. Again, you were doing all the things you need to be doing.
Thank you.
So I'll share with you some of the information that I included in your T-tests, which aligns with your self-report pretty closely, all right? So with regards to standards and alignment, I did mark you proficient. I just said that the activities within MTA are relevant to your students' current functional levels. Technology was integrated when appropriate. So again, that just lines right up with the indicators and proficient. Data and assessment, again, proficient. I said that you regularly monitor student progress and provide feedback to students as necessary or as needed. Knowledge of students, I included that it's evident that you know your students well.
Yeah.
Lessons are connected to their prior knowledge while also providing new learning opportunities. So with regards to your article of the day and some of the things they're working on, we've talked about, trying to pull in things that you know that they're interested in within that program, which I think for high schoolers all kids is important, but like we talked about, it's really hard to get them going with some of the things in dyslexia. So pulling in interests is very important. With regards to activities, again, proficient. I said that groupings are based on student instructional needs as it relates to the intervention. So you've got your kids in Kit 5, like you said, in elementary, it's exactly where your kid is, but they come to you in all different places, and you've got to kind of pull them together and work on where they most closely align. So again, rock solid proficient in domain 1. With regards to instruction, achieving expectations, I included that you set high expectations for students by holding them accountable for their learning. If at any point during your lesson a kid strayed, you're like, nope, right here. For example, the 3, trying to do all 3 colors at once. If an error occurs during the lesson, you very quickly provided a brief reteach, and then did not move on until they showed you that they understood what you were talking about, which is great. So we made sure we had mastery in the moment. Content knowledge and expertise, again, proficient. I said that you use your expertise in dyslexia to accurately convey content knowledge in multiple contexts. There's so much heady language that comes into the dyslexia program. If any of your teacher counterparts came in and listened to you talking about digraphs and diphthongs, and they would be clueless. And you have such a mastery of the content, which I think is great, and which I think is really important for your kids. Some of your kids, their teachers would have no idea they knew all that, because the teachers don't know it. In high school, they're not teaching those things, so I think you're doing a really great job. again, holding the line and making sure kids are accountable to those things that they need to know. Communication, I included that your lesson was planned in such a way that you were able to clearly communicate expectations throughout. I included that you primarily use remember and understanding level questions with some application level questions as they kind of work through the lesson, which really aligns with dyslexia. And so there are some things where to move up the T-test rubric, there are some higher order thinking things that have to happen, and it's tough in dyslexia because we're at the acquisition level.
Yeah, they're still
So
learning it.
we're still going to be learning it. So just knowing that proficient is rock solid. With regards to differentiation, I included that you used a multisensory teaching approach. You were able to align the learning provided to the individual needs and learning styles of the students. And so I just want you to know that I recognize that you are implementing some things that aren't a part of the MTA lesson to try to pull your kids into the fold and get them excited about learning. Like we said, some of those putting the paper in so they can do the dry erase, or you had the activities where they came to the board. That's not all necessarily included that way, but you're trying to appeal to their learning styles, which I appreciate.
Thank you.
Monitoring and adjusting, again, rock solid proficient. I included that you regularly sought feedback from students to monitor their progress, and then you made adjustments to the instruction and did some reteaching as it was needed to make sure they were successful, which is really what we're looking for. And then with regard to learning environment, Dimension 3.1, that's that routine procedure, I marked you accomplished. You marked yourself proficient, so I'm gonna tell you, you are definitely accomplished. You have clearly defined routines and procedures. Whether they're in the small group with you, they're working independently, they need to use the restroom, where materials are, the kids, they knew your classroom like the back of their hand, they knew where they could get the things they needed, they took ownership of their materials. And so really, the suggestion on the leadership piece is really to even continue to bump you up. But you want to run a really well-oiled machine within your room.
I have to.
Yeah.
When you're working with individual or I don't have time to. So and the
They need
kids
to be
are
able to
old enough
monitor.
to be able to monitor
Yes,
themselves.
Well,
so
you've done a phenomenal job in that area.
all the
So
kids
kudos.
are good kids.
Yes. With regards to managing behavior, I included that you maintain clear expectations for student behavior that align with the expectations of the code of conduct and the expectations that we have for kids at Legacy. So you are holding the standard with those students. And then your classroom culture, I marked you accomplished. I included that during small group instruction, that all students maintained positive, upbeat dispositions. They interacted with you as well as their peers appropriately. Student choice was provided at their independent level, and they worked individually on the Lexia and the article of the day. So they seem to all really come together and have a mutual respect for each other, for you, as they collaborate when they're with you, as well as when they're working on their own. So I appreciate that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Do you have any questions for your feedback regarding your observation?
No, I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I'm just thankful it's over.
You did a great job.
After my daughter's like, Mom, why do you get so nervous? And I said, I don't know. She goes, how many have you done? And I was like, well, when I first started teaching, they didn't do appraisals. So maybe after
and then you had, let's see, so that, and then I'm sure you had PDOS for a long time.
Yeah.
And
So
then T-TEST.
I don't know. And this is my 34th year, so probably 30 appraisals.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I moved to Wichita Falls after my first 2 years, and they did do appraisals up there. So I don't know how long ago. I started teaching in '86, so I don't know when they actually. I guess '88, maybe '89.
Well, you're doing a great job. No need to be nervous.
I appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any